Hey, excellent. So now we're moving on to our next session, which we have Corinne Bourgoin, who is a shelter operations coordinator at the MSPCA Adoption Centers, and I am her biggest groupie and fan. She's going to be talking about Reunited, and it feels so good. Rethinking stray cats and improving your RTH rate, return to home rate. Corinne began her animal welfare career as a volunteer with the MSPCA, where she is now the shelter operations coordinator. A detour to Hawaii allowed her the opportunity to work with the Maui Humane Society in many capacities, including coordinating volunteers, foster parents, a high-volume spay-neuter clinic, and community cat programs. In her current position, she works with shy and feisty cats who need additional behavior resources. She also focuses on reuniting lost cats with her owners, and they do a fantastic job at the MSPCA with regards to that. And it looks like they are working on getting her slides up. So I'm going to turn this over to Kristen and Corinne.
Let's see. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to talk about some terms and some phrases that we use in the animal welfare world, specifically around cats. And like how historically we've used these and how they might be perceived to those of us in the field currently or historically. So a stray cat, we might think of this cat as an unwanted cat, a cat that doesn't have folks caring for it, a homeless cat, a street cat, something like that. We also will use or hear the term abandoned quite a bit. I can sort of use this interchangeably with the term dumped. And this we might be talking about, you know, when we go to that phrase like, oh, people are the worst, you know, that the neighbors moved and they left the cat behind when they moved, that you know, people are dumping their cats at, you know, feeding colonies, friendly cat, feral colonies. We might use the term, quote, responsible owner. And have a perception of what a, quote, responsible owner will do when their cat is missing, which is to immediately do every single thing that might be on a checklist for a lost cat, that they put all other things in their lives aside and are putting 120% of their effort into finding their cat really at all costs. And then, you know, we might, whether we know this or not, whether we like have the stats and the facts, or whether it is a perceived truth in our day-to-day work, that, you know, when a stray cat comes into our shelter, that reclaim or return to home is probably an unlikely outcome for them. So when we're thinking about these words and these phrases that we kind of throw around in our day-to-day work, I think historically these things have led to the following results. So the best and most recent statistics I have for stray cats that wind up in a shelter environment who are then reunited with their owners is 5%. And this data is from Shelter Animals Count 2020 statistics. And that is a pretty, you know, a pretty low and abysmal rate. So how can we, with this information, what we're going to talk about today, rewrite the narrative around a stray cat? So let's look at these terms again and kind of like reframe them and rethink them a little bit. So all I know is that a stray cat is a cat whose history is currently unknown to us. We all wish they could talk to us, that we could tell them that they could tell us what's going on, but all we know is that we don't know much. We might know some specifics, where they were found, the circumstances of their findings, who found them. You know, they might be able to give us some details, but we don't really know their history. I would really urge us in the field to not use the term abandoned unless we have facts around that. You know, if we know that someone, you know, put this animal in a carrier on the side of the road, or, you know, if we have information from a landlord that the people moved out and the cat was left in the apartment, something like that. But otherwise, I would urge us to say, you know, unless we saw it, we can't say it. Some things to think about around that, you know, the traditional, the neighbors moved out and left their cat behind. You know, when a lot of cats get lost, when people move, when there's lots of busy things going on in the household, the doors are open, there's movers, they're in and out. So that's a situation that, again, I think if we saw it, unless we saw it, say it. A responsible owner, truly, in my time doing this and working with a lot of people who've lost their cats and counseling them through that, even the people that we might think, that they're like the gold star A+ adopters that come into our organizations that we want, they're like the dream people that you want to adopt the cats that you have available. People have no idea what to do. They don't know what to do. There's a lot of bad and misinformation online about what to do. And compassion fatigue sets on really early in the process. It's a very overwhelming thing. They just don't know what to do. So I think that we have this idea that owners should be doing everything. They don't even know what the list of, quote, everything is to do. And then I also think it's really important to acknowledge that there's lots of barriers in place for people to do all the things that we want them to do. So there might be language barriers. They might have a physical disability that keeps them from, physically getting out of the house to search and ask for resources. They might have a lack of access to the internet or computer, something like that we just don't know, and we can't make judgments about how much they love the cat based on what they are or aren't doing. And I would like to challenge us to see reclaim or return to home as the exciting result of a little bit of work that we can do to help reunite pets and their people. So I think we love to tell a story. We love to tell a compelling story in animal welfare. And I understand that maybe historically a narrative of a, quote, dumped cat, it makes a good story. It helps us feel good. It might, to be honest, it might make us feel a little bit heroic about what we do, and that how maybe we might think that the best thing that ever happened to the cat is ending up in our organization, especially if the cat maybe is in poor condition, maybe it's skinny, has fleas, is matted. But again, I would urge us to think about the fact that we don't know anything about the circumstances of where the cat came from, maybe how long they were out, and whether or not someone is looking for them. So what might change if we really flip the script on how we approach stray cats that come into our organization? And just a quick aside, I want to back up and say, one of the things that we really try to do is before cats come into our doors, we're trying to ask the people to, talk to their neighbors, put a paper collar on the cat, put up flyers, post on their local social media, and that we're really trying to make sure we're not taking friendly indoor-outdoor cats off the street that they live. So just an aside to that. But what might change if we really flip that script on how we approach the cats that come into our shelter? So a couple of years ago at the MSPCA, we decided to lead with what might be a very scary idea, which is that we don't know everything. All we know is that the cat is here, and we're professionals. We're the experts in the animal welfare field. And as the experts in our community, I really think that we have a duty to make it our job to make a reasonable attempt to find out if they have a home. And really more than that, to presume that they have a loving home who really wants them back, and vice versa. So what we're going to talk today is some practical advice on what we do. I would challenge you that the biggest, I hope your biggest takeaway to this is to challenge the mindset of your organization, to move forward with the presumption that every cat that you see come through your doors has an owner looking for them until you've done your due diligence to prove otherwise. All the other stuff we're talking about here is logistics, and you can figure out if this stuff works for your organization, if something else might work better for you. But really, I think it starts with a positive outlook. And when we decided to make that change and update and codify our stray hold policies that we'll talk about going forward, we've done this over the past few years, but our most recent return to home rate for 2022 is 34%. So we're really proud of that. That's, what's that, nearly 7 times the national average. The highest rate we've gotten is 36% in 2020, and I've been trying to beat that every year since, but we haven't quite gotten there. And I think, specifically the shelter that I work in, we have a pretty high visibility shelter in a busy city area with an attached 24-hour emergency animal hospital. So I can't, say this for sure, but I would anecdotally say that we also get a pretty high incidence of challenging stray cats, medical stray cats, and cats coming from pretty far away from our shelter, because if someone does find a cat in need on Saturday night at 11 o'clock, we might be the only place in like a 50-mile radius that they can bring the cat for safe harbor. So one thing I want to say is that, you know, we decided to put some policies in place for all of the check boxes, all the things that we're going to do when a cat comes into our program. Just like we have intake protocol for vaccines and paperwork and behavior evaluations, you should really have one for stray animals. So it doesn't have to be lengthy or complicated, but I'm going to go over what ours looks like. We all know microchips. We love microchips. That's great. So of course we're going to scan for a microchip. And we can go into a little more details about microchip things in a little bit. We're going to look at our lost and found reports. So our organization takes lost and found reports for animals. I would say one of the most important things that you have to stress when you're taking lost and found reports is photos. As they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I have found that people are really bad at describing cat color and patterns, and it is really hard to interpret people's cat colors and patterns. So a photo is the most important thing. But if a microchip doesn't get us there, then we're going to go look at our internal lost and found reports and see if we have any, matching cats. We also have really good working relationships with our other local shelters and municipal animal controls. So I know for our shelter specifically, which is the MSPCA in Boston, myself and our Boston Animal Control and the Animal Rescue League's Boston shelter, we're pretty much in constant contact. We kind of have just a constant email thread going when we have stray cats come in, because sometimes someone will have reported that cat to Boston Animal Control, but not us, and the cat ends up with us, or vice versa. So sometimes we're able to make those reunifications even when we haven't had direct contact with the owner. I also have found that this is just a really great way to build relationships with those organizations as well. So when other things come up, when we have to collaborate in other areas aside from lost and found pets, we already have great communication and a good relationship to fall back on there. So I would encourage you to find those other groups in your area and how you can collaborate this way. And then a picture, like we said with the lost, just like we make sure that people who lost their pets send us a picture, we need to make sure that we are taking pictures of the strays. And for us, we post this in a dedicated lost and found Facebook group. And then these get really readily shared to more local groups. So they get posted to the MSPCA Lost and Found Pets, and then folks will share those posts directly to the neighborhoods and towns where the cats were found from, where they're probably more likely to be seen by an owner. If having this many steps for a stray cat comes in sounds daunting, I would urge you to kind of not worry and really see it as part of the things that you need to do. We at our shelter take in around 350 to 450 stray cats a year. So I kind of call that a stray a day is basically what we're looking at. And we do this for every single one of them. And really it doesn't take more than a few minutes. I can search my lost and found database while I'm like on the phone with on hold with the microchip company. Really, honestly, the most time-consuming part, I'll be honest with you, is getting a decent photo. So you want a nice, clear photo, a good shot where you're going to get details of the animal showing its face and markings. And, I will say that for every good shot, like we've got of this perfect cat loaf right here, you are going to probably have your most time-consuming thing be these bleps, a bunch of boops that I have all over my phone, lots of butts, and certainly some bad attitudes. So, there are times when I have to decide what is my time management. So a little bit blurry photo is better than no photo at all. This cat right here, specifically Putty, I was going to give her a little bit of time to cool off before I took another photo to post, because this was not really showing her at her best. And, generally doing all of this ASAP upon arrival is a good idea to get the process moving. I'll tell a very quick story about this cat here. This is Putty. Putty is a cat who we found in a carrier outside our shelter doors one morning. So, she certainly does fall into that abandoned cat category. but we still did all the things that for her that we would do for any other unknown cat coming into our shelter. And it's a really, really good thing that we did, because it turned out through posting her online that we were able to make contact with her owner. And this was a really sad and unfortunate situation, but something that does sometimes happen, where the actual owner had given her to a family member to temporarily take care of while the owner was going through an illness. And that family member unfortunately made the choice to abandon the cat at our facility. But if we had presumed that there was no one out there looking for this cat, or no one out there that loves this cat, the actual owner of this cat would have never known what happened to her. So this is, I think, a really good example of, we don't know, so let's presume someone is out there looking for this cat and loving this cat. We also decided that we wanted to get as much information up front as possible. We often found ourselves in kind of a holding pattern, where we would get a stray cat in, have questions, and then be playing phone tag with the finder, or in kind of a waiting period to see if the cat was socialized, or if there were any extenuating circumstances we needed to know about. So we came up with a form. I'm going to share it with you and highlight some areas that we felt like it was good to get information up front. And, you know, certainly I'm happy to share these things with people if you want to reach out to me after this. So this is our form. And just some things I'll highlight is, like, have they been feeding the cat, or is anyone feeding the cat? Is it friendly with them? Because we all know that the shelter is a pretty stressful place. So a cat that is appearing to be shut down or aggressive could be a cat that outside a shelter environment is quite friendly. If they brought the cat into their home, did they have any notes about how that went and how their litter box habits were? Have they seen the cat interact with children or other pets? One thing that we wanted to note here, and was often a holdup for us, is, you know, sometimes people who bring in these cats might have a vested interest in maybe adopting them themselves if they become available for adoption. And that was sort of a holding pattern that we would have. The person would express interest, and then we would reach out to them, and then they would have to think about it, and then they would have to decide. And so, you know, a thing that we discuss up front when they bring the cat in is, if the cat's interested, if they're interested in adopting the cat, that once that cat, if it's made available for adoption, we'll notify them, and we want them between now and then to be thinking about and preparing for that. So if we call them and say, yes, the cat's available for adoption, they can come down that same day or that next day and make that happen. And then we also talk about circumstances that might make the cat a good candidate for TNR. And so we can sort of open up that conversation about why that might be the best choice for the cat, and would they or someone else in the neighborhood be willing to be a caretaker for the cat, and we can start that conversation early. So social media, really, you know, as you'll see when I show you my stats, this is one of the biggest valuable platforms that we have. So this is just an example of the kind of posts that we make. So again, we have a dedicated Lost and Found Facebook page. And this is specifically for found animals that are in our MSPCA adoption centers. There are so many other lost and found pet pages on Facebook that we didn't want to kind of water down. You know, it's important that people who have lost pets have places to post them, but they already have a lot of places. So this is very specifically for the animals that are found in our shelters. And so we want to get that post up quickly. We'll talk a little bit about what our stray hold policies look like, but we don't want to be held back on our stray hold timeframes because we haven't been able to get that post up quickly enough and in the view of a potential owner. We want the information to be consistent, so we have a blurb that we copy and paste, which is the same thing every time. And you might notice here that, you know, this says whether it's an intact female or, you know, neutered male, the street and the neighborhood they were found in. I think historically, sometimes in animal welfare, we've wanted to withhold some information so that, the potential owner who comes forward has to like share basically what is a secret code, you know, is the cat neutered or where was it found, to quote prove that it's their cat. What I found is that when we withhold information, you get a whole lot more inquiries that you then have to take time to sift through and return phone calls and emails when it's not their cat, where if they had had that information up front, they could have self-selected out and understood that it's not their cat. And I also truly, in like the hundreds of cats that I've done return to home for and done reclaims for, honestly, I have never once had a situation where I felt like someone was coming in and pretending this was their cat just to get the cat. Like never, ever, ever once, even in the like top little layer of my gut, have I ever felt that. Occasionally we'll have folks who want to come in and see, you know, we might think it's probably not their cat, but we'll always let them come in and see in person. And every single time those people will come in, and the minute they see the cat, they realize it is not their cat. So that's one thing I want to say to you, is I don't think that you need to withhold information. You might actually be doing yourself a disservice and causing more work when you put all that information up front. Again, people can self-select out, and only the people who really think it might be their cat will reach out to you. So that's been pretty helpful. And then you also might notice here that it says something like, it's difficult for us to monitor the comments on these photos, so please contact us directly. I still monitor the comments. And so what I find most often in the comments that might be helpful is, it would be great if people did contact us directly, but sometimes what you get is not the owner of the cat, but a neighbor of the owner or a grandchild of the owner who might make a comment, and then you can, you know, reply to those folks directly and actually be able to have a successful outcome. So microchips, I'm sure everyone here is well aware of microchips, how they work, how they can be successful. But I just wanted to share a little bit about, you know, how we go a little bit above and beyond and what kind of impact that has for us. I'm hopeful that this looks familiar to everyone. You know, if you've been in the field for a long time, you might scan a microchip and be able to see the number and letter pattern and presume what microchip company it belongs to. But with so many microchip companies out there, so many registry tools, so much rehoming, it's very possible that that chip could be registered through a database that is not the same that the microchip manufacturer is. So that's why we use this microchiplookup.org, where you can put in the microchip and it will tell you the most likely and the most recent registry that chip has been updated with. So you can contact them first. It's probably the most streamlined and helpful way to go about that. When we call or email or go into a database to find microchip information, we want to get all the information the first time. We don't want to have to call back because we didn't ask something and the microchip info didn't come through on the first call. So we want to get, of course, the owner's name and phone number. We want an address. We want a secondary emergency contact. We want an email address. And we also want the implant facility, so where the cat was microchipped. And once we get that information, we're going to blast these folks. We're going to call them. If I call them and I don't get them, I'm going to leave a voicemail. Then I'm going to text the number. Then I'm going to email the email address. And then I'm going to go move on to if there's an emergency contact or a secondary contact and do all those things as well. There's really no point waiting. Just get as much information out there as possible. If those, if making that contact doesn't sort of yield me a result pretty quickly, I'd say, you know, within an hour or so, I'm then going to contact the implant facility. So that might be the vet, that might be the shelter, that might be the rescue. Because sometimes what happens is animals are microchipped, but they are never registered or they have out-of-date information, as we all know. But the vet or the shelter might actually have like a more current contact information for this person than the actual registry of the microchip. So that can be a really helpful way to go about that. And then, you know, this is the next step that we're doing that I don't know if everyone is doing. And again, this might feel like a thing that maybe you don't have time for, but this could also be a great volunteer role. Or, you know, when I show you my stats, I hope you'll see that it is worth it, which is if all of these things fall through, but we do have an owner's information, that's what the internet's for. I'm using Google, I'm using Facebook to search for people. Now, you know, if the person's name is John Smith, that's going to be harder. But if they have a more unique name, this is a way that we can go about finding people as well. I've been able to find people on Facebook and send them a message through Facebook. I've been able to find people's like work emails through their LinkedIn and things like that, and have really great results from that. So just a couple, like, I think, interesting microchip statistics. So back in 2019 was the last time that I looked really closely at this data. About half of the stray cats who came into our shelter had a microchip, so that's a good start. Of those, only 70% of those were registered at all, or registered with like up-to-date working contact information. So, you know, good, you know, certainly in the majority, but it could be better. And then I do think it's pretty interesting that if working microchips were our only method of reunification, so if we were just going for that low-hanging fruit, like not looking at loss reports, not doing extra due diligence on you know, finding people with out-of-date microchips, or using social media, our reclaim rate drops to 12%. So that's still good. That's still more than twice the national average. But you know, you can see that we're up to that 34, 36% with these additional tactics. So microchips are great, but like we can't necessarily rest on our laurels with the microchips. And so this is just one of those fun microchip stories that I love to tell. This is Kitty and her person, James. And so Kitty was a cat who came into our shelter. She had a microchip. All the phone numbers and everything were a dead end, but the person did have a quite unique name. So I was able to find that person on Facebook, message that person on Facebook. They got right back to me and were really excited to hear that Kitty had been found, but they did let me know that they had moved out of the state a couple of years ago and had rehomed Kitty to their neighbor at the time, who they knew loved Kitty and, you know, was really devoted to her. And so we're hopeful that everything was okay and that Kitty could get back to her owner, James. So they gave me James's phone number. So I called James. And when I tell you, when I called James, James was like, literally, I could feel him shaking over the phone. He was so excited to hear that Kitty had been found. Kitty had gotten out the door a couple days before, and James himself is disabled. He doesn't have a huge ability to like leave his house. He's not a computer savvy kind of guy. So he's one of those people that we talked about a little bit earlier that just literally didn't know what to do. And even if he did, he would have some barriers to doing those things. So us taking probably what was 10 minutes to find this person on Facebook, have a message back and forth with her, get that phone number, and then contact James, led us to be able to have this reunification. And this is, you know, another example just of the way our teams work really collaboratively. You can see we took this photo of James in his home. That's because we were able to physically bring Kitty back to James. Again, he had some transportation issues. And then once we got to James and were able to drop Kitty off, find out that James had another cat who had, you know, been rehomed to him by another neighbor over time. That cat was intact, and James was super happy to also take us up on our low and no cost spay neuter services. So we were able to get this cat back home and then also make a connection with someone in one of our neighborhoods that we serve that needed our services and just didn't know how to access them. So it's like this very holistic thing to me that I really appreciate. And that's kind of exactly what we're going to talk about next. Go grassroots. Do you have the resources to send, you know, so if all those things, the microchip, it continues to be a dead end, but you have an address, like, do you have the resources to send someone from your team to go with this big happy smile, knock on their door? Will your local animal control, or if you are animal control, you know, go do a visit for you, leave a note on the door if no one answers? Can the finder help? So very often when we have pets come in, the people who find them will send them back with flyers. So they're hanging flyers in the neighborhoods for us. Or do we have someone on our team? This is also a great volunteer job. We have like a little email list going. So when I have a neighborhood that I need found pet flyers hung in, I can send an email out to those folks. And they can either print them themselves from home, or we can print them at the shelter and they can come pick them up and hang those out there. A quick little story that I like to tell about this. So this is Kaylee, who had worked for our community outreach team. We had a cat come in to our shelter who was really critically injured. And while we try to have, a stray hold for owners to be able to find their cats, in this particular instance, our vet team knew that holding this cat for any amount of time was really inhumane. So they had made the decision shortly after intake to euthanize. She was just in that bad shape. But the cat did have a microchip, and all the things on the microchip were a dead end. So we sent someone out to knock on the door. And also the cat was found in Roslindale, which is a neighborhood of Boston, but the microchip address was in Dorchester, which is another neighborhood of Boston, but they're quite far apart. They're not adjacent neighborhoods. So we honestly had very low hope that this person still lived at that address. But we sent our team out. This person knocked on the door, and when the owner answered, it was her. Her cat had been missing for weeks. We will never know how her cat got from Dorchester to Roslindale. And of course, we were very sad to tell her that the reason we were coming and the reason that we were getting in touch with her is that her cat had been found, but her cat had been really, really critically injured and didn't make it. But that person was so thankful for the information and for the closure. If we had just kind of moved along and presumed that we wouldn't have a resolution to the situation, that person would never know what happened to their cat, would never have any closure. So while it was not happy news, I think it was news that they were really grateful for, that we went those couple extra steps. We also, want to offer support to people who have lost pets. So we have a really robust lost and found section on our website. And you can visit mspca.org/lost if you'd like to visit. Here we sort of outline things that folks might want to do, have contact information for other shelters or their local animal control, information about the importance of making sure that your microchip is up to date and how to do that if you're not sure. We link to, I'm hopeful that you've all seen the Front Street Shelter in Sacramento, California, made some fantastic videos about what to do when you've lost a cat or a dog, and they're also available in Spanish. And so we link to those there. They're like 6 or 7 minutes, and it really breaks down in a really easy to digest way all the things that people should be thinking about doing when they've lost a pet. We offer flyer support. So, not a lot of folks have printers or access to that kind of stuff these days. Everything's on our phone. So we will make and print flyers for people to pick up if that's helpful to them. We just want to make really simple, bold flyers, basic description, and a way to get in touch. We will counsel people through microchips. So I can't tell you how often I talk to someone who's lost a pet and I ask if the pet has a microchip. They say yes. And my next question is, are you sure that that microchip is registered with your up-to-date contact information? And they say, I'm really not sure. So it's just a conversation of like, where did you get the pet microchipped? Can we find the paperwork? Can you contact the vet? Can you contact the shelter to get that information? And then directing them to contact the microchip company directly to make sure that that is all up to date. We can give them contact information for their local animal control and other shelters. We rent traps, and we'll give folks tips and advice on how to most effectively use that trap. And then just, practical advice to talk to their neighbors, searching their property. Don't wait to contact us. I have quite a few people who will call us as soon as their pet is missing, and then they'll get back in touch an hour later to say that they found their pet, and they usually feel really silly and embarrassed. And I always tell them, like, I would much rather talk to you once and then hear the happy news from you an hour later than have you wait a week to reach out to us when maybe we could have helped you before your cat came home. Here in our area in Greater Boston, we have a lot of coyotes. Coyotes have made a comeback, which is really great. I think I hear this a lot, and I think it's a really big part of that compassion fatigue I mentioned earlier, that like people really want to find their cat, but the whole process is so overwhelming. And I think a lot of people on the internet find some weird reason to tell people that their cat has probably been eaten by a coyote. And certainly, is it a possibility? Yes. Is it much more likely that their cat is scared and hiding somewhere, or that their cat, if it was friendly and outgoing, was picked up and is in someone's house somewhere, or that their cat is at a shelter somewhere? Yes. So I really kind of try to talk people down off that coyote ledge. and that's just an example of like providing moral support. So, you know, if you have staff or volunteers that are helping people with lost and found pets, sometimes it's just like offering an ear, letting them vent, giving them some advice, giving them some tips. This is a cat named Soda Pop, who I think is like one of the cutest cats I've ever seen in my whole life. And he's an example of, he got lost. His folks came and rented a trap from us. And she kept setting the trap, and she kept getting skunks and possums and raccoons and other people's cats. And she would reach out to me every couple of weeks and say like, hey, I still have the trap. Is it okay if I keep it? I don't really know what I'm doing. You know, if I should keep doing it. I'm really frustrated. I'm really sad. I don't think Soda Pop's ever going to come home. And all I would say to her is, you know, like, it's up to you, and it doesn't hurt to keep setting the trap. And on day 45 of setting the trap, she came out at night because she heard the trap close, and Soda Pop was in the trap. And I think that was, you know, she really reached out to us and said that like without our moral support, she would have given up on that trap a long time ago. And she just kept at it because we just kept saying, you know, just keep doing it. If you feel strong enough, if you feel up to doing it, keep on going ahead and doing it. And then we really offer all these things in reverse to people who've found a pet. So if someone reaches out to us and they found a pet, we're going to check our lost reports to see if there's any matching lost pets. We're going to offer to make found pet flyers. We're going to offer to have them come in and have the cat scanned for a microchip. We're going to give them information on other shelters to check. And so we are actually able to make a fair amount of reunifications happen outside the shelter walls when we provide these lost and found services to people. So, you know, that 34% of reunifications are cats that came into our shelter physically, but we also, you know, at least a couple times a month are able to make reunifications happen outside the shelter when we've had communication from the lost pet owner and the found owner, or not the found owner, but the pet finder. We also really made an effort to use our data to set our stray hold policy. So in Massachusetts, there's no laws regarding the legal stray hold time for cats like there are for dogs. And so we kind of had like a lot of gray areas, a lot of things that made it hard for us to make decisions without having data behind them. So having data about our cat reclaims really made it a little bit easier for us to move forward. Didn't give us a good place also to stand on when we had a situation where maybe if the cat had been adopted before an owner came forward, or, you know, possibly euthanized before an owner came forward. I won't talk about what our stray hold policies used to be, but what they are now is that we have a 3-day stray hold policy for cats that don't show any sign of ownership, and a 5-day stray hold policy for cats that show some sign of ownership. So spay, neuter, collar, microchip, painted toenails, that type of thing. Our data shows that overwhelmingly, if a cat's going to be reclaimed, it's within 48 hours. So day 0, the cat comes in, and if it isn't reclaimed within 48 hours, it is very, very, very unlikely to be reclaimed. So that felt like a good amount of time to still give people extra time outside of that 48 hours, and that we could kind of feel like we had data behind our decision-making policies. So here's an example of a cat who got reclaimed way outside that 48-hour time frame. And again, another example of that we want to be, you know, understanding that people don't know what to do when their cats are missing and have compassion for them. So this is a cat named Inky. He came into our shelter, and part of the reason he was with us for so long before he got reclaimed was 1, he was FIV positive. 2, he had some, as you can see here, like chronic URI likely related to his FIV status. And 3, his sociability was kind of iffy. You know, he was a cat that if he hadn't had the chronic URI and FIV, we probably would have TNR'd and put him back in his neighborhood if he had been in good condition. But because of his FIV and the chronic URI and his dental disease, he didn't seem like a good candidate for that. But he was also not especially interested in socializing with us. So he had been here in our shelter for about 3 weeks while we were treating his URI and trying to get some of his other medical things under control when we received contact from a person saying that this was their cat. So you might wonder, why does someone wait 3 weeks before coming forward when their cat is missing? So this owner, she is the only English speaker in her family. She herself has some developmental disabilities, and so, reaching out as a not native English speaker, someone maybe who has some challenges communicating with folks, just didn't really know what to do or how to do that. And it was actually a friend of hers who saw his post on our Facebook page. So she came down to see him. And when I tell you that Kat's personality and attitude changed immediately as soon as he saw her, he was rolling around, purring, all those kind of things for her. Clearly her cat. And so again, someone who needed a little bit of support from us. So he got neutered, he got the medical care he needed, he was able to go back home to his person, live happily in a way that he was not going to in our shelter environment. And now this is someone who, again, knows to reach out to us. We provide her with food support, we provide her with vaccine support for this cat, and she's become a really good advocate for him and other animals in our community. So another thing that we're using this data for is to make sure that we are not filling up our spaces in our shelter with long, unnecessary stray holds and holding cats back when it's not necessary. So, I'm going to guess some of you do this, and we did this for a long time, where if a cat was on a stray hold, they couldn't possibly be seen by members of the public. They had to stay in the back, in our receiving area, not in an adoption area, maybe in a place where they weren't getting as much volunteer interaction. And what we realized is that, if a cat is healthy and friendly enough to be in our adoption area, they can actually go up there. We could put a sign on them, something like this, where telling people, this cat isn't currently available for adoption, but if they do not get returned to home, they have a date coming up where they would be available. So sometimes what we're able to do is identify adopters up front. So if someone on March 1st met Cleopatra and they really fell in love with her, we could take their information and on March 3rd, give them a call and they're come down and they're ready to adopt, freeing up space for some of those more challenging long-term medical or behavior cats, and helping these cats move out of the shelter more quickly. We also, though, want to set up success for some difficult situations that might come up. So we have, at our shelter, decided that if a cat is adopted out and then an owner comes forward after the fact, we are going to facilitate those people getting the cat back. In the past, we had kind of a wishy-washy policy that we would reach out to the adopters and explain the situation, but we couldn't really enforce anything. And so what we decided is that when people are interested in adopting a cat whose background is having come in as a stray, we have this kind of loose script here that we that staff talks to people about. So if someone came up and asked about Cleopatra, we would say, just as this cat came into us as a stray. We've really done our due diligence in finding her owner, but it's possible an owner might come forward after the cat was taken home. It's quite rare. It happens about 1% of cases. So for us, that's maybe like 3 or 4 times a year. But it does happen, and we really want to prepare them for that possibility. So if you were to take this cat home, we would contact you to, return the cat if the owner came forward. And then we see what their reaction is. And so if their reaction is, oh man, that would be really hard, but I understand that really seems like the right thing to do, then we could move forward with the adoption. If the person's reaction is that's ridiculous, I couldn't ever do that, those people don't deserve to have their cat back, they must be awful owners, then we can say, you know what, I understand that would be really difficult, and it sounds like, why don't we find you a cat whose background is known to us, but that's not a possibility. So then, in our adoption agreement, you'll see here number 6, it outlines this. So on occasion, a person may provide evidence that they're the rightful owner of this animal. And if they come forward after the animal is adopted, they're going to return them. And again, it happens very rarely, but it does occasionally happen. And so almost never is it just the sort of worst case scenario that we imagine, that it's just someone who doesn't care. There's a situation like this one, this cat, I named Tan France. He came in, he had his stray hold, he got adopted the same day his stray hold was up, and about 3 weeks later, an owner came forward. So you might say, why on earth was this person not looking for their cat for 3 weeks? That person was hospitalized. The whole time they were in the hospital, their family member who was supposed to be caring for the cat told them, yep, the cat's fine, the cat's great, everything's good, everything's fine. And then when they actually came home from the hospital and the cat wasn't there, the family member said, oh yeah, the cat was lost a while ago and I didn't want to tell you. And then the neighbor started talking to her neighbor, the owner started talking to her neighbors and found out that someone had indeed found the cat and brought him to the MSPCA. This is one of the situations that's completely out of the owner's, hands. It's a really terrible thing that happened to them. We were able to get in touch with the adopter. They were sad but understanding, and this person was able to get their rightful cat back. Just wrapping up here, a couple of different things that we can do as well. We can get permission up front to share contact information. So when I take a loss report, I say, if someone finds a cat matching this description, could I share your information? And if someone finds a cat, I say, if someone lost a cat matching this description, can I share your information? So we don't really have to be the go-between. We can get them in touch directly and help those cats get reunited while staying out of the shelter, which is this, facilitating when we don't have the cat. Sometimes we get in touch with owners, we're able to make contact, and it turns out that those cats don't end up going back to their homes. That could be maybe because the people had been thinking about rehoming the cat, or the situation now that it was hard to take the cat back. And in those situations, I still consider that a win. We still were able to get a history and an info on the cat that we wouldn't have had before. There's also some situations where cats come into us in really, really, really poor condition for any number of reasons. And we're able to make contact with the owner, and maybe through advice from our veterinary team and information about their current circumstances, maybe they, together with us, might make a decision that euthanasia is the most appropriate outcome for the cat. So the cat doesn't actually ever go home, but they have the opportunity to come in and say goodbye if they would like. And I still consider that a win. Again, the cat's no longer suffering and people get closure and we're able to make a decision about that, the outcome of their cat, as opposed to us making a decision that we're kind of uneasy about, worrying that an owner might come forward, or them never getting closure on the situation. And then we've got, looking local lost and found Facebook groups, having volunteers do that would be really helpful. Sorry, I know we're running out of time. Skip this one, and then just outline here what's been successful for us. So, this, if you see here, 26 reclaims were from working microchips, but then 18 were from social media and 17 were from detective work on outdated chips. Those things really, really add up. 5 were from matching loss reports, 4 were from communications with other organizations, and 3 were some kind of random others. So again, microchips are great, but I would really encourage you to lean into the detective work on outdated microchips, and also having a really strong plan and presence on social media. And that's it. And I don't know if we have any time for questions and answers, but I really, really appreciate it. And I hope that this gives you an opportunity to just kind of rethink. Again, like I said at the top, these are practical things that we can do, but I think that changing the mindset of yourself and your organization around the history and the possibility of return to home for these cats is kind of like the biggest picture thing you can do to change the mindset of your organization.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to jump right into questions real fast. We're going to just go over a little bit because we're at lunchtime, but we started a little late, so we're going to go over a little bit. We have a whole hour for lunch. I don't eat that slowly. I should eat slowly. All right, so I'm going to speed pass through these. I don't know if you want to flip your camera on or not, but feel free to do that. One thing was time frame. Question on time frame for the family to reclaim a cat. So say somebody comes back 2 or 3 years later, and it's determined it's their cat. I mean, is there a time frame on it, or no?
So we don't have a time frame. I will say that the most I've ever seen in those sort of outlying cases where the animal's already been adopted and someone comes forward is like a couple weeks. Ultimately what it comes down to is that contract gives us a good place to start with the adopter, but in the end, it's actually not legally binding. So we can tell them that we're going to contact them to, arrange return of the cat. They've heard that information up front. If they really, really, really wanted to dig their heels in and make it a problem, then the original owner of the cat would certainly have would reasonably be able to start a law enforcement case, and the MSPCA would cooperate with whatever that was. Like we can't then go out and physically take the cat from the adopters, but it gives us a good place to start.
Right. And every state treats cats in a different way. I mean, Massachusetts treats cats like property. So there's when I was day to day, it was $35 was the value of a cat. So just,
wow.
Getting a lawyer to want to take on a case for what would be considered $35, and then there's whatever you have on top for pain and suffering and all that kind of stuff, then, I think there have been some small claims cases, but it never has gotten anything bigger than that. But again, it's a rarity. You're saying you run into this even for the couple of weeks at a time. It's, it's a 2 or 3 out of the year. I will say, I think a lot of eyes popped out and bulged out when you said that you had 53% of the strays that came in were microchipped. What do you attribute that to?
And because that's a lot. Yeah. Okay. I think that we're very lucky here in Massachusetts and in the greater Boston area that we have a lot of really strong organizations doing spay, neuter, and access to low-cost microchips. Obviously, the MSPCA, Animal Rescue League, MRFRS, other organizations that are offering those resources to the community. So I think our community is pretty saturated in a really positive way with being able to have cats in the community microchipped.
We didn't spend a lot of time talking about sort of the pre-situation. So there's a lot going on around the country right now where organizations are saying, somebody calls in and says, I've got a cat in the neighborhood. Don't bring it in. Just leave it. Just leave it. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Don't leave it. So how do you determine what gets brought in as a stray and what's left in the community? How do you vet those kinds of requests out?
Yeah, that's really tricky. I think, when we have the opportunity to talk to people beforehand, when people reach out to us, that's when we're, checking our lost reports. We're telling them about, I'm sure everyone's familiar with, put a paper collar on the cat, see if someone calls you back, assessing the sociability of the cat. Is this cat approaching you on the sidewalk and stop, flop, and roll at your feet? That's probably a friendly, indoor, outdoor cat or community cat. Do you want to bring it in to have it scanned for a microchip? Trying to avoid those cats coming in. When they do come in, we're still having those conversations. Can we take a lost report? Can we take the cat back? Can they take the cat back with those resources? If that's not possible, sending them with the flyers, asking them to do the due diligence in their community. So I think we're really kind of at a cusp right now of really trying to keep those cats from coming to the shelter, but then trying to do our best for the cats when they do end up coming in to stay.
Just trying to get an understanding of the perspective here. In my brain, Boston's a pretty big city, pretty big population. To me, 350 to 450 cats doesn't seem like that big of a number for the city of Boston I understand we're talking about strays only. We're not talking about return to field or TNR cats. We're not talking about owner surrenders. We're talking just what you've identified as a stray that's being taken in. But it's still, for such a large population, it still seems, has it historically been that way at MSPCA, or is that something that's changed over the last 10 years or so?
I think the number has gotten smaller, actually. I think because of the sort of proactive communication we're trying to do before folks show up. And here's the thing. I think we all know, there are people who will just show up, and that becomes a little more challenging when they're physically here with the cat. But I do think that overall attitudes are changing and evolving. And I think even within one conversation that I have with people and the way they start out having a lot of concern for the cat that's on the street, and then we discuss all the reasons why that cat might be happy on the street, most people sort of leave that conversation understanding that that might be the best place for the cat, and the cat is home currently where they are. But I do, to be honest, Stacey, I don't have the exact data on this, but I would presume that that number has gotten lower over the years with spay neuter and just less cats in our community, and to like proactive communications about what a cat in your community looks like, and that not all cats need to come into a shelter as soon as you see them on the sidewalk.
And I would say in general, I can pretty confidently say that the MSPCA's intake numbers into the Boston shelter have trended down over the years.
Yes, greatly. Yep.
Yeah, so it, last question and then we're going to close it up. But, okay, time. The list, it sounds like there's a lot. Like, how can this be done? We don't have enough time as it is already. Who does all this work, and how much time does it take?
You know, I mean, I think that it is a lot of different facets, and I know that it can seem really overwhelming. I think that this is a fantastic thing that you could find a group of like dedicated volunteers who could feel really like empowered and made to feel like they have something really important to do, which they would, to do this. I think that the like managing people who've lost and found pets is like its own time consuming thing over here. And then, you know, if you're really focused on the animals that come into your shelter, like I said, really the picture taking is the hardest part for me. You either have like a super shut down or a super angry cat who is like, get that camera out of my face, or you have like an aggressively friendly cat who you cannot get a clear picture of because all they're doing is like head booping you. But you know, the animal in the shelter, I would say, including the microchip, checking lost and found reports, reaching out to organizations, taking the picture, posting it, 20 minutes, 15 minutes. Like, you know, if it was all done in a condensed way, it might not be done that way. You might do this now and this 20 minutes from now and this an hour from now. So that I would think, or I would hope, feels very doable as part of all those. You know, it's like you have to decide that it is worth the investment. And I hope that like one thing that we're showing here is that it can be worth the investment, you know, shortening your length of stay, opening up those spaces in your shelter. And then, you know, I would agree, depending on how much the community is reaching out to you about lost and found pets, that can feel a little more time consuming, because maybe you're having to have longer conversations, coaching people through things, making connections. But this could be a really great thing to recruit a group of volunteers who can really take that on. I think would be fantastic.
Okay, I know I said that was the last question. I have one more. So for those cats that have been kept on the street by discussions with the public, how do you ensure that the cat has been fixed if it hasn't been brought in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think, you know, for intact males, it's a lot easier for the public to figure that out. So, you know, the MSPCA, we have a low-cost spay neuter clinic. So, you know, that can be part of the conversation when people have found a pet, that, you know, if it turns out that they haven't found an owner, or no one in the community after they've done all the things have identified themselves as an owner, is the cat going to stay in their community? Are they going to continue to care for the cat? And literally just offering them, you know, a link to sign up for our spay neuter services. And sometimes people, you know, especially females, people will bring the cat in and we'll find out it's already spayed, and it's great. Now we know.
Excellent, excellent. There are a couple other questions. I will make sure I get those questions to you. But this was awesome. Fantastic presentation. I love it. Thank you so very much.